Welcome to the Hashtag Lounge at the London Conference on Cyberspace. I'm pleased to be joined by Pavan Duggal, who's an advocate at the Supreme Court of India and is also president of Cyber Law Asia. We'll come on to those two things in a minute, if I may, but what I'd first like to ask you about is, as a professional working in India, how is cyberspace changing the way Indians do business and Indians sort of relate to each other in a societal way?
I think cyberspace has changed dramatically in the last 1 decade. Now, India did not have much of a PC penetration, so they decided to piggy ride on the mobile revolution. So with huge amount of mobiles and communication devices and smartphones being constantly used and constantly being upgraded in India, the mobile internet is what's changing the way people are working, people are governing themselves, people are interacting with businesses, governments and the like. So for example, mobile internet is allowing fishermen to have details of what the weather is going to be or how much cost is the fish going to fetch in the market. It's already enabling the farmers to decide their crop patterns. It's enabling m-commerce in a big way. And with SMSs or the short message services being extremely popular, I think it's dramatically changed. So there's a huge leapfrogging from the PC to the mobile revolution.
So it's almost as though India has sort of ignored the desk aspect and has gone straight to being able to walk around with access to the internet and hasn't dealt with all these cumbersome machines on tables.
It's correct, primarily because these communication devices have reached up to the rural places. The farmers, even the rickshaw puller on the road is having a mobile phone. Today, if my wife has to ask some vegetables, she'll call up the vegetable vendor on his mobile and he's going to deliver the vegetables on the mobile. So I think mobile internet has huge potential. That's why the m-commerce market in India is going to be huge. India is grappling currently with mobile payment issues, but they're likely to be sorted out very shortly.
So it's a very exciting time. It's very different. Can we just then focus a bit on your particular area of expertise in India, which is the issue around cyber and cyber law, and particularly issues around the relationship of human rights to cyberspace. I mean, obviously India is a thriving, long-standing, democratic country with a rich tradition of looking at human rights and responsibilities. Could you just give us a flavour for some of the issues which are coming up in India about the relationship between cyberspace and human rights?
I think there are a huge amount of issues coming in. The first thing is, should access to internet be considered as a fundamental right? I think that's not yet been specifically stipulated, but the way the Indian Constitution has been defined, Article 21, defines the fundamental right of life. And the right to life has been interpreted by the Indian Supreme Court to include right to have access to anything which enables a meaningful human life. And today, no meaningful human life is possible without access to the internet. So I think access to internet is likely to become or likely to be recognized by the judiciary as a fundamental right.
And that process has started already, has it? In terms
it has already started.
Case law and jurisprudence.
There's a huge amount of case law, judge-made law, that's already working in that direction. We have not specifically come to those levels, but the jurisprudence is evolving. Second important issue is, today, large number of digitally empowered people are existing in our country. That's the digital divide is immense and huge. And the bigger issue is, how can we allow and how can we use the cyber legal mechanisms in a manner as a tool by the government so as to reduce the digital divide. That's happening in a big way. Third thing, all kinds of communication devices, mobile phones have been legalized in the sense they've been now specifically covered by the law, and should you do any kind of unacceptable or illegal behavior, you can face criminal consequences of punishment and imprisonment and also fines. In addition,
so in that sense, the mobile and cyberspace communications are now brought into the purview of responsibility as other forms of communication, whether you're writing a letter or writing a newspaper article or giving a speech. Yeah.
Absolutely. So any kind of a communication device you're dealing with, any kind of a computer or computing device, you are covered by the Indian Information Technology Law. And if you're going to do anything which is not acceptable according to the law, then the law provides various remedies. In addition, after the Mumbai attacks in India, we've seen an immense increase in cyber terrorist activities. And that's why India has gone ahead and has demonstrated its thought leadership and has now made cyber terrorism as a heinous crime, punishable with life imprisonment and fine.
Right.
Various kinds of new crimes, including social media crimes and mobile crimes, have now been specifically covered under the law.
So how is India getting, in legal terms, the balance between human rights, freedom of expression, the internet simply as a tool for delivering those things, and the responsibility aspect that everything from child pornography through to cyber terrorism through to mis-selling of goods. How's that balance being achieved?
I think the government of India is remarkably clear in its perspective that in achieving that balance, the relevance and the importance of service providers and intermediaries can hardly be understated or overstated. That's why a huge amount of responsibilities have been straddled upon anybody who's an intermediary. The way intermediary is defined, it includes any person who provides any service on the network. So whether you are hosting, whether you are providing any content, you're a network service provider, an ISP or a telco. And if you're an or a network service provider, you are made responsible for removing any content which is not in accordance with law, and you're given 36 hours to do that. So that's one way of achieving balance. Second way is also, I think, there's an increasing realization within India that it's not just about rights in cyberspace, it's also about duties. And there's a need for balancing both rights and duties, both by users as also by service providers. The government is currently only doing a very minimal kind of enabling role. It's not coming as a center stage player, but is trying to provide the effective frameworks through which this kind of balancing can take place.
Okay. And India, although it's a vast and diverse country, is a country and has to relate with other countries. Is there are there any conflicts or opportunities occurring in terms of India's perception of human rights and freedom of expression in other countries? Is there an international balance to be achieved which India may have a significant role to play in?
I think there is need for far more harmonization of unanimity within the international perspective of what will constitute freedom of speech and expression, how much state power is acceptable, and at what point of time would exercise of state power directly infringe upon individual rights. Now, the way the law is structured in our country, we believe that people have fundamental rights and they cannot be curtailed under any circumstances. But your fundamental right of freedom of speech and expression does not give you a license to defame or a license to tear down somebody's reputation. So I think that's the kind of direction where it's working across. Large number of countries in that part of the world do not yet have clarity of how to maintain the balance between freedom of speech on the one hand and the emergence of cyberspace. And I think India can play a thought leadership role in this direction.
Now, is that thought leadership going to come through interaction between lawyers who specialise in human rights and that sort of issue? Is it going to come through policymakers? Or is it going to somehow magically evolve the sort of communication? Where is this going to come from?
There's no magic formulas, like there are no free lunches. It will have to be constant efforts. All kinds of stakeholders will be extremely important. The government, for providing the enabling framework for all stakeholders, whether they are intermediaries, service providers. More importantly, policymakers and lawyers will have to think through of how to ensure that that balance is going to be obtained. Now, you have seen, and that's a trend happening in India as well, that increasingly governments are retaining upon themselves the powers of interception, monitoring, decryption and blocking. Now, in these kinds of times, it's very important to come up with adequate checks and balances to ensure that these powers are not adequately or inadequately misused.
And are you optimistic about that?
Oh, I think this is the way for the future. There's no other way ahead. And the only way forward is, well, we'll have to work for it. Rome was not built in one day, so we cannot be sure that our next step will be the best step. But if the intentions are correct and if the direction is clear, I'm very hopeful that this will lead to something concrete in the coming times.
Pavan Duggal, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for joining us in Hashtag Lounge.